What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is more of a follow-up to my original review of the Husqvarna Nord 901 Expedition, the one titled 20,000 kilometers on the Husqvarna Nord 901 Expedition. Would I buy it again? I'd strongly urge you to go check that video out. It makes more sense in context. We've now just hit over 23,000 kilometers on the motorcycle, and as promised, I took it into Nordica Moto for a service to get the oil changed, to get the filter changed, along with a few other stuff. It's basically spot day for the Husky, and mainly I wanted to swab the air filter as well and take a look at what the lungs of the motorcycle look like after 23,000 kilometers of real-world riding. Now, unfortunately, the guys at Nordica are a bit busy and they won't have time today to actually remove the gas tank of the motorcycle as I intended in the main video. I spoke about a couple of things such as potential clog on the breather hose or a bit of a pinch, along with a small coolant leak. But that said, we are going to have to remove the gas tank anyway at the 30,000 kilometer service as well when we are checking the valves, so I figured I'll just leave it for that. And in the meantime, I will keep an eye on things to make sure that everything's running fine. The important bit was to actually just see the air filter as well, to have that swapped out. So yeah, this video isn't just about filters and fluids. I figured since I'm already riding out to Nordica Moto, I might as well show you some of the Transylvanian roads that I take to actually get to them. They are my relatively local dealer. I always have to ride 100 kilometers / 60 miles to get to them, but I always enjoy this road because it is very scenic. It runs by the foothills of the Eastern Carpathian Mountains, crossing a few iconic Transylvanian villages. And while I was out here and the weather is nice, I figured I could kick off a new series that I've been thinking about doing, kind of showing you guys a bit around Transylvania, both the scenic roads as well as some of the mountain roads, some of the cultural aspects of the area, because not a lot of people are familiar with this place. And I have met other motorcycle riders that really enjoy this place simply because it is so wild, whereas it's still very developed at the same time. But I don't want to go into too many details this time around. I don't really have a lot of time right now, but I kind of just want to give you an idea. This will be a completely separate series. I'll have a completely different playlist for all these videos. This time I just want to kind of touch on some of the villages that I'm crossing now on my way to Nordica Moto. Also, a quick PSA. I recently managed to wreck my Insta360 X5 during a test ride event, and if you've ever looked up how much those cost, well, yeah. So if you feel like supporting the channel, I've got Patreon, YouTube super thanks, buy me a coffee all set up. No pressure, but every little bit helps me keep this thing going. But enough talk. I am Nimrod. Welcome to Ride with Nimrod. Let's roll the intro and get into the ride. After leaving Regen, about 40 kilometers into a very scenic ride, I enter Sovada, a quaint little resort town tucked into the hills. You do have to take a short detour to get to the main attraction, which is Bear Lake, or Lacul Ursu in Romanian. It has been attracting tourists since the Austro-Hungarian Empire was still a thing. Over the years, the place has developed quite a bit. There's a bunch of hotels, restaurants, all built around the lake. That said, it's still generally well priced, and you see a decent number of motorcycle riders and tourists year-round. In the summer, it gets popular for the salt lake and spa treatments, and in the winter, people come out here for the ski resorts further up the mountains. Now, Bear Lake itself is a natural salt lake, and something a bit more rare, it is something called heliothermic. That basically means the sun heats up the top layer of water, but because of the salt content, the heat gets trapped lower down so the lake stays unusually warm. Pretty cool stuff. The name supposedly comes from the shape of the lake. People say it looks like a bear's hide if you look at it from above. I don't know how true that is, but either way, it's a nice spot to chill and maybe walk around the lake. Also, maybe the name has something to do with the fact that there is a decent bear population in the area, and occasionally you even end up spotting a bear strolling through town. And I am not kidding. I stopped for a quick look, took in the view from the wooden terrace, and then got back on the bike to make my way to the dealer. It's always fun riding out here on a weekend, not too far away, and the roads getting here are absolutely wild and stunning. Next up, a bit further east, we reach the village of Pride, best known for its salt mine, which has been the backbone of the local economy and community for centuries. The mine first opened its gates in 1762, back when this region was still part of the Hungarian kingdom, long before Romania even existed as a country. Since then, it served both industrial and therapeutic purposes. Tourists would descend into its cool depths not only for sightseeing, but also to treat respiratory issues like asthma or bronchitis, thanks to the naturally salty air. On the surface levels, the mine was practically a mini underground city, with playgrounds, chapels, even little cafes carved out of salt. On the lower levels, though, it remained an active extraction site going down as far as 2,700 meters or approximately 9,000 feet deep. This is deeper than the highest mountain peak of Romania, which stands at 2,545 meters or 8,300 feet. Pretty insane when you think about it. But in the spring of 2025, after weeks of heavy rain, some that were happening as I was filming the Chinese adventure bike shootout in said heavy rain, the nearby Korun stream swelled beyond control and breached into the mine structure. At one point, the entire stream was flowing directly into the mine, flooding chamber after chamber. Locals tried everything. They built barriers, redirected the stream, even attempted an underground dam, but one by one the reinforcements gave way. Now the mine is shut down, it's still full of water, and sinkholes have begun appearing on the surface, so it is sort of in the process of collapsing as I'm working on this video. It's hard to shake the feeling that something deep has changed, but the village isn't gone. Hotels are still open, shops are still selling handmade crafts, wooden carvings, and pottery, not as actively, but the locals are pushing through. If you're planning a trip through this part of Transylvania, I'd highly recommend using Pride as a base. From here, you can ride into the surrounding mountains, visit nearby towns, or just enjoy the winding country roads. Every visitor helps this community rebuild. And who knows, the mine may be gone, but in its place there's a high chance a salt lake will form, deep, mineral-rich, and with healing properties of its own. A new chapter may already be starting, and Pride, well, it's got centuries of history proving it can adapt. I always enjoy riding through here. I know some of the locals as well. They are very humble and welcoming, and they serve some of the best food and homemade palinka. Next up on our way to Nordic Komodo is a small but special village called Korund. Now, if you've ever passed through Pride, you'll notice the similarities. Handmade pottery, traditional woodwork, lots of Hungarian riders visiting, but Korund was a bit less affected by the salt mine situation a few kilometers over. Still quiet, still charming. And if you're into mushrooms, maybe some of the slightly magical ones, you might have actually heard of Korund without even realizing it. In fact, in Joe Rogan's podcast episode with Paul Stamets, the mycology wizard himself gives this village a subtle little shout out.
And you're the first guy ever to wear a mushroom hat.
Okay.
That's really a hat made out of mushrooms?
This hat's actually made by some ladies in Transylvania.
Can I feel that?
Yeah.
Yep, this is the place. Korund, or Korond in Hungarian, the mushroom hat village. These ladies use a mushroom leather substitute called Amadou to craft actual wearable art. Belts, bags, hats, they're not just souvenirs, they're proper natural alternatives to animal-sourced leather. You'll find the type of hat Paul Stamets was wearing on the Joe Rogan Experience for as much as $300, but bear in mind that these are proper Western prices. You can source this from locals at 1/3 of the price even. Best solution is to get on your motorcycle and hop on over here. But Korund's got more than fungi fashion. Think horse-drawn carriages through pine-covered hills, homemade food and palinka poured freely, all year round. Whether it's a hot summer day or snowing sideways, you're guaranteed a proper Transylvanian welcome. So yeah, this is the kind of road I end up taking every time I ride out to Nordic Komodo for a service. And honestly, it's one of those routes that never gets old, especially when you've got villages like Korund along the way. If you enjoy these types of ride-along vlogs or you're into more in-depth stories from the road, then hey, hit that subscribe button. I'm planning a lot more of these. But for now, let's jump over to the shop and check in with the guys at Nordic Komodo. See what they found in the airbox and what else they've dealt with during the otherwise unscheduled maintenance service. And yeah, how much damage it did to my wallet. Because I know a lot of you KTM and Husqvarna Norden owners, especially in the United States, are used to dropping anywhere from $500 to $1,000 for this kind of thing. So let's find out what the real story is here in Eastern Europe. So first thing they did was remove the bash plates. And yeah, this thing is impossible to keep clean inside, mostly due to chain loop deposits as well as other debris. I've had a minor French kiss with an Audi A3 a while back, and now there's a spot where the plate actually rubs up against the fuel tank on the left side, so they'll do something about that. Underneath the engine, you've got these rubberized bushings or dampers that KTM uses for mounting the bash plate. From the factory, they're meant to reduce vibration and allow a bit of flex, but they're kind of a pain to get hold of. They do tear really easily, and mine have been replaced a couple of times already, so I ended up just having normal bolts and spacers installed instead. It works and it keeps the plate locked in securely. Next step was draining the oil, removing both screens and the filter. As you can tell, the color of the oil wasn't too bad. It still has a bit of its original redness, and yep, there were some metallic bits on the filter and the screen. I know that sounds scary, but it's actually pretty common to see small fragments. What looks like engine glitter is really just a signature of moving parts doing their job. A trace of normal wear, and definitely not a warning for me to check the camshafts yet, hopefully. We'll see later on. Stay tuned and subscribe to the channel to find out later. They replaced the filter and both screens with fresh ones and poured in Motul 7100 10W40. This is the oil they've recommended since I bought the bike, and it's what I've stuck with for the last 23,000 kilometers. One important detail to point out here, even though the manual says the engine takes 2.8 liters of oil, that's not actually enough to reach the correct level in the side glass. If you want it to sit exactly where it should, you'll need 2.9 liters. A lot of KTM and Norden owners get confused about this, but I've seen the same thing in previous oil changes, and this time I made sure to pay extra attention, and you can clearly see there's exactly 0.9 liters missing from the third Motul bottle. So yeah, that confirms it. 2.9 liters gets you right to the proper level. And then we finally get to the air filter, the moment we've all been waiting for. The mechanic carefully unscrewed the plate on top of the air box and slowly pulled out the plastic that fixes it into place, as well as the filter, making sure nothing fell in, just in case something got stuck or caught in the folds of the filter. First thing I did was stick my phone in there to have a closer look at the air box. And well, honestly, it's not perfect, but it's definitely not terrible either. I did spot some small traces of dust inside, but nothing too dramatic. That being said, it's still far cleaner than what I expected after 23,000 kilometers of riding, so overall I was actually pretty happy. Now the oil you see in there, that's not from any kind of leak, that's excess crankcase oil that gets pushed into the airbox, which is totally normal. Some of it likely gets burned off during combustion, and some may even help catch stray dust particles that made it around the filter edges. Not 100% sure on the theory behind it, but it's not something to be concerned about. I do take dust ingress seriously. If I'm riding off-road and someone ahead of me is kicking up dust, be it a bike, a truck or whatever, I either back off or overtake as soon as I can. I don't stay in dust clouds if I can avoid it, and I think this reflected in how clean the airbox looked overall. Which is why, despite the options out there, I opted to stay with the OEM filter. I was happy with the job it did, and I see no reason to change something that clearly works, at least for my riding style. But for those of you planning more serious off-road use, especially in dry, dusty terrain, there are better options out there. Like I mentioned in the main video, Rottweiler Performance makes a full airbox upgrade, and you'll also find various foam pre-filters on AliExpress, some more affordable than others, some outrageously expensive. Still, if you bought your Husqvarna Norden to actually ride off-road most of the time, then yeah, an upgraded off-road foam filter should probably be the very first thing you do. As for the bash plate, they cleaned it up and added some soft padding where it was rubbing against the tank. Super thoughtful of them, because I kind of forgot about that detail, but they haven't. Then we moved on to what I call a spot treatment for the chain. I thought I was doing a decent job keeping it clean at home. Turns out I've been doing about 20% of what these guys do. They soaked it in fuel, scrubbed it with brushes, cleaned it with chain cleaner, and even added cardboard shields to prevent the gunk from hitting the bike or the floor. Proper care. Once everything dried off, they lubed it up using Motorex Road Long Life Chain Lube. For the record, I usually use Muc-Off's PTFE-based Teflon lube, which was recommended to me and works fine, but even WD-40 will do if nothing else is available. And now for the electronics. They ran a full check on the ECU. A few intermittent errors came up, which was expected since I had a dying OEM lead-acid battery. It left me stranded a few times to the point where I was carrying a jump starter just in case. Also, I have since changed the battery and I'll be doing a video on that as well, so make sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see that video. But yeah, the OEM battery, not ideal. When it fails like that, the ECU tends to log all sorts of weird errors, but it's not actually critical. They cleared those out and ran the latest software updates via their diagnostics tool. During the flash, the dashboard threw up all kinds of error messages, which is completely normal. It's just the bike rebooting and reinitializing systems while the firmware gets updated. And now for the grand bill. With taxes included, labor was 400 lei, which is about $90 US. Parts, including oil, filter, screens, air filter, and all the cleaning materials, came to around 730 lei, so about 170 bucks. So altogether, you're looking at a grand total of 1,130 lei. That's about 260 US bucks. That's a great deal for a full service at a KTM authorized dealer, especially considering what owners in the UK, US, or Australia often end up up paying anywhere from $500 to over $1,000 for the exact same work. So, if you're ever wondering whether it's worth relocating to Eastern Europe just to keep your bike maintained, I mean, it's not the worst idea, especially with the views we've seen in the earlier part of the video. And that was the Nordica Moto service visit. The bike's in top shape again, and I sleep better at night knowing I took care of things properly. Should I ever need to make a warranty claim with KTM, I've got proof that even my unscheduled maintenance was handled at an official dealership. If you enjoyed the content, whether it's the vloggy storytelling or the technical details, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. I've got more videos planned, including the new battery review I teased in the Big Norden 901 video as well, along with some more entertaining content. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.